Oh, here we go. So, hey, Mr. Wilson. So, we are sanding on your boat. We got the decks pretty well sanded, and we're starting on the sides, starting to fire out the sides and the transom. And this is your engine hatch. So, this wood, I am extremely confident this wood was replaced. The wrong, I don't think necessarily the wrong species. Yeah, really, it's the wrong species. It's pretty dark. But the other thing, it was replaced with a cathedral, or a plain sawn instead of quarter sawn. It should have a ribbon stripe in it like the rest of your boat. And this cathedral grain right here comes from the process. You know, if you look at a plank that's about, or a log that's about to be sawn, this is plain sawn. They're just going straight across, and of course you got growth rings. So out here, your growth rings are going like this. When you're in the center of the wood, center of the log, your growth rings are, pretty much like this. Going from face to face instead of from edge to edge. All right. So then if you consider the fact that one end of the log is larger than the other end of the log, and it's being sawn this way, then when you pass through the growth ring and your saw is coming out of the wood, you get this cathedral grain. So, so we got cathedral grain here, very obvious. Number one, the wood's too dark, and number two, it wasn't sawn properly. So this is probably African mahogany. The boats were built out of what they called Philippine mahogany, which was, there is no such thing as Philippine mahogany. It was a word invented, or a term invented by Chris Craft when they could not get genuine mahogany. And they went to the Philippines and found some wood, and so they call it Philippine mahogany. So they did use some African, and they did use sapelli, and they used Meranti was one of them. Luan was another. But so the situation that we got is that wood grain does not match the wood grain that was used on your boat. Was probably African on top. So the African's not a bad deal, but you've got this cathedral grain, and it shouldn't be cathedral. It should be more like a ribbon. You see these ribbons right here? That's approaching a cathedral grain, but you got ribbons on the sides. You've got ribbons called ribbon stripe. So right here you've got your attempt is almost getting some cathedral, but you're only seeing half of it. By and large, it's a ribbon. So only reason I'm bringing that up, this is the easiest opportunity. I mean, if you want to change it to the proper grain of wood, now is the time. If you don't, then that's fine. We can make it look pretty damn good. It does get a blonde stain to it. It gets bleached and gets a blonde stain. We can make it look pretty great, but it won't necessarily be exactly right. Also, your spacing between planks is pretty large. So, just some issues with the work that was done prior to us. And I just wanted to know how you wanted to approach it. We can spline this, make that look pretty damn good. But at any rate, you got some cracks that we're filling, some fairly large cracks. If it was my boat, I'd be changing these planks, but it's not my boat, it's your boat. So just want to get some guidance as to how you'd like us to proceed. I'll show you a piece of the wood. I would use sapelli on it. It's not quite as dark as African. I can use African. And I've got some over here on the shelf. I'll show you that. It's probably an extra day's work, and maybe $100 worth of wood. So it's about a $700, $800 bill, something like that. So here is some African. I can use African, and you see the ribbons in that African. So we can make them out of African. Here's another piece of African, and the ribbon. You kind of got to look past the rough sawn wood. You kind of got to look past that to see, but you can see the ribbons overall. I mean, here's a ribbon I'm tracking with my finger. So, and then the other species we could use is Moretti. It's quite a bit lighter, but probably ought to use something close to what you've got on there, which would be the African. And I have some sapelli over in another rack. The sapelli is just a bit more. It's a bit darker, or about the same. It's a bit light. It's darker than Philippine. It's lighter than African. Matter of fact, you've got probably African on the outside. You probably have. Yeah, I can make it. I can make either one of those look right with the rest of the boat, especially since we would get the grain right. But you probably have right here. You probably have sapelli here and African here, or you may have or you may just have African here as well as here, but it came from a different tree, different forest, different year. Etc. So anyway, just wanted to inform you and see what you want to do. We got plenty of work to do. If you can get a hold of me tomorrow or the next day, certainly by next week, we got plenty of work to do on the rest of the boat before we have to worry about this. Thank you.